Okay, so I want us to talk about acceptance, resistance, war. Well, here's what I'm thinking. I just watched a video of a vlogger that I've been watching, and she's the vlogger that I mentioned before, where her mother got ill, and so she's just posted a video that she labeled it something like, this is the video I recorded before we went to war, and she like capitalized war. And what she's talking about is the war of them fighting, her mother's fighting for her life, right? And I'm just kind of like, oh man, here's another example of me seeing this, and I know I understand this concept very well, so but I'm seeing a few examples now. Another one is, there's this girl who does some readings. I stopped resonating with her, but it took me a bit to see that. I just kind of gave some, like, stepped back and did some observing to see if, like, things would balance out. But basically what happened was she has started to feel like she's getting psychic attacks. And she has started chanting a spell that includes talking about defending herself. And so here's another place where she's starting war, right? Defense is the first act of war. It's a quote by Katie Byron. And some people might be like, well, what does that even mean? What do you mean defense is the first act of war? Obviously, the offense would be the first act of the war. It's like, no. The offense is just it's an offense, or if it's offensive. And if you do not return that with a defense, then there's no war. So it's not a war until you have defense, until you defend. Now it's a war because now you're resisting. And I wanted to look up this quote to get, don't worry, I'm getting at something here. This is a concept we've talked about before, I have talked about before, and I think some of you would probably already understand it. But I'm talking about it in this context now, okay? I wanted to see about the quote, what you resist persists. I believe it's a Carl Jung quote. Originally answered, what is the source of the Carl Jung quote? What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. Why is my water pump repeatedly going on? Well, I'm probably going to have to find out, because it's not shutting off. Well, okay, it shut off. That's good. Let's see if it'll quiet down for a minute. Jeez, I'm kind of chilly. So here's what I wanted to talk about. What we resist persists, as Carl Jung has said. Now, Carl Jung was probably talking about it in another context, but I want to see if I can find out what context he was saying it. But what he really is referring to is the way energy works. If you... Oh, I have to go check this situation. Hold on. Alright, I solved it. You know the little like flapper thing on your toilet? It was apparently not settling back down to its spot, so the toilet kept running. And it's a little bit disturbing because I've been gone all day and I haven't used the toilet since I got home. That means that was happening all day while I was gone. Darn. have solved the issue. What Carl Jung was talking about may have been something to do with, a way to handle some psychological issues or whatever. But what he was getting at, what he was really pointing at, is the fact that, like, the way energy works. Energy, everything is energy. Our thoughts, our beings, our molecules, our words, sounds, everything is energy, right? And when energy moves in wave forms, right? And certain frequencies would have that energy moving in a different way, right? And when we resist one of these energies, right? When we resist something, say it's a thought, a feeling, whatever, or a behavior even, we're holding it back, right? We're resisting. We're kind of like blocking that energy. And meanwhile, like, that energy's building up here behind this resistance. And so when we start to feel discomfort, it's literally because we are not in acceptance of what is. We are fighting against what is. We are resisting what is. And so when we go to war with an illness that we have, we are resisting. We're actually letting it build up its power behind that resistance. And eventually, it's probably going to push that resistance over. And there may be damage caused until it does so, right? Like, this resistance, it's like a stagnant energy, which can cause us to be ill and things like that. Oh, I feel like I'm having a hard time explaining this concept that I understand very well, so that's weird, first of all. But I'm just going to persist, right? And then when we look at somebody who says, well, I'm going to defend myself against something like a psychic attack, it's like, oh, well, that's an energy, and you're now resisting it. You're defending yourself. And when it's something like a psychic attack, to defend yourself against it actually gives it power, because now you are calling yourself a victim to it. So you're putting yourself in a literal weakened state. You're telling your own energy, we are weaker than that thing, we must defend ourselves. But in actuality, if you were to not take that stance, what I have found is to not resist things like that, to just let them flow right through. I am bigger than that energy. That energy has no effect on me. I am separate from that energy. That is not my energy. That energy is flowing through. I have no place for it to stick. I am not a victim to that energy. Do you see how strong I am in the face of that situation when I don't resist it? Do you see how it has no effect on me? Just flows right through. And so this concept of what we resist persists becomes very important in the case of things like that. Because if we resist and start this war, it's a war within ourselves, and it will show up in our realities. And now all of a sudden we are literally in a war. Like, we manifest a war in our own lives, things that we have to fight against. And I'm not saying that we just should be doormats. I'm not saying that, right? If we were to think of specific examples, I could talk to you about the appropriateness of when to discern and go in another direction. And if it's like, if we're talking about, like, say, let's use this example of an unwanted advance. If you're a woman and you're getting an unwanted advance from a man, I would say, instead of saying that you're going to defend yourself, I would deflect. It's a lot different, right? So like, here's this unwanted advance coming towards me. And instead of resisting it, I'm just going to deflect it. And be like, oh, sorry, I'm busy. I'm going over here. Instead of going, who do you think you are, treating me that way? Like I'm some object or piece of meat or, don't you think your wife would like to know? So you see how, like, you can use other methods than defense that would be much more appropriate given certain circumstances, right? If somebody is like throwing a punch, am I saying that you shouldn't duck? No, definitely duck. Definitely run away if you can. Definitely do that. And if there's no choice, but to physically defend yourself because they're repeatedly attacking you and you can't get away, then you're going to have to do it, right? You're going to have to do it. But do you see how that would be like one rare occurrence to use that method in, where the benefit would outweigh the detriment? Whereas all these other smaller ways that we go to war, they're completely unnecessary and it makes our lives harder than they have to be. Is this my whole point? Yeah. I mean, like, it matters what mindset we are in and how we are directing our energy. Here's an example. So someone that I care about has been diagnosed with cancer. I've talked to this person already in the past about how it's important not to claim illness. This was a while ago. Before any of this came up for her, I was talking about it to her. And I try to teach some people this. Most people won't listen. Like, say I did come down with something. You will not hear me telling anyone that I am sick. Like, cancel, clear, delete. See, like, it even bothers me to say that statement as an example. I don't want to say that statement. I'm not claiming any illnesses, okay? Because I know everything is just energy and energy is moving. So why would I claim it? Why would I hold on to it if I don't want it? You know what I mean? It's going to be a lot easier for it to pass on through if I have not claimed it as my own. So even if I did experience symptoms, I still wouldn't claim it. And this is something that's tricky when I have to communicate with people sometimes. Like, I just will not share it with somebody if I don't trust them to understand how energy works. And especially if I think they're someone who would go tell everybody else that I was that S word. No, that person is not getting any information from me about my condition. I'm not looking for anyone to have sympathy for me. I don't need their empathy. I take care of myself even when I am in those conditions. And I'm not owning it, right? But this is only because I understand how energy works. And this year is an exception for me. But prior to this year, I hadn't been in those conditions in a long time, But this year in particular, a lot of things started hitting me in my physical vessel. And that's why it's been so important for me to implement, the juicing and the just like getting active again and all that stuff, which I've done. And it is, it was just like so obvious that that's all I needed to do. So it's nice to be doing it again. Anyway, so this person that I care about has been, she was just diagnosed with this condition. Now, she had been feeling tired and things leading up to this, but she ended up going to the doctor. They did some tests. They gave her a diagnosis. Within days of the diagnosis, that the doctor told her she could not be cured, that she could treat it, but she could not be cured, that they don't know how to cure it. Within days of that diagnosis, she was in the hospital and being in a coma to be treated. And it was very scary and sad. And I talked to her today, and she actually mentioned that the idea of fighting for her life didn't sound very appealing. And it was because that she hadn't been really enjoying her life lately. But she switched her mindset. She came out of this coma. She was only in the coma for a few days. Thankfully, she got herself out of the coma. She woke up from the coma, during which time I was praying a lot. And kind of communicating with her soul and just kind of saying like, hey, let's do this. You got this. And she came back and she told me that, she decided that she did want to live and that she wanted to enjoy life. She didn't want to live the way she was living either. And now she's doing a lot better. Even through the chemotherapy, which a lot of people suffer greatly through. She was able to get some food in. She's not constantly vomiting. She was up out of bed during that. So, do you see how having that diagnosis from the doctor and owning it into her body had a very detrimental effect on her body immediately? And then upon waking and changing her mindset and deciding that she wanted to live, that had a profound effect on her body. And her body is now willing to do what it needs to do to recover. Her body's working hard for her. If she didn't change her mindset, that's not what would be happening now. Our mindset, how we think about things, matters. So if we are declaring war against an illness, what cancer is it's when some of the cells in the body have turned against the community of cells in the body, and they decided to just be out for themselves, like very selfishly, not taking into consideration what the rest of the cells need, just kind of growing and selfishly taking up all the resources in the body for themselves to expand and grow. That's what cancer does. So it's kind of like narcissism in the body. It's like it's like a bunch of cells have turned against the rest of the cells, and then they're just growing selfishly to the detriment of everything else, right? So what manifests this is it's like anger and that's unprocessed, and self-hatred and lack of forgiveness for self, and just like all these little things that can get stuck in our psyche where we're not fully on board with love for ourselves. And that's what makes some people more susceptible to it than others. When they say that it runs in family lines, it's the environment of the family line that creates it, not the genetics. Because remember, our genetics are turned on and off by our environment. So if we are in our environment where we've declared war against anything, our bodies are responding to the environment of war. And if we've made that war internal, our bodies are going to respond to that, an internal war. So have you ever heard that quote or saying about, is it on money or something? It's like, united we stand, divided we fall. That's true. That's true about the cells in our body. United we stand, divided we fall. And that's true about humanity. And that's true about how energy works. So when we can come into unity, when we can work together, when we can understand that even the part of us that has turned to cancer needs our love, needs to know that we care about it too. There was a reason that it was there. There was a reason that it was being excluded from everything else. So it's just another example of where love is needed. Instead of going to war with the illness, love ourselves through the illness. Love ourselves through the illness. Instead of going to war with the psychic attack, which could be in the form of like jealousy, envy, or anger from somebody else's thoughts. As simple as that. Instead of going to war with that, we love ourselves through that. Instead of going to war with any challenge that we face in life, love ourselves through it. There are challenges. It is difficult. Some of them are very painful. We may shed some tears. But as long as we are the ones who don't turn against ourselves and love ourselves through whatever the challenge is, while being accepting of that is where we're at. Because once we start, like, if we won't even accept that that's where we're at, then we can't go anywhere. We can't neutralize the field. So that's essentially what we're trying to do, right? When we love ourselves through the thing, we're no longer in resistance to the thing. When we accept the thing, we're no longer in resistance to the thing. It doesn't mean that we agree with it or like it. It's accepting that it exists, so that we're not pushing against it, we're not resisting. Because resisting the energy is the war, and the war is the issue. The war is uncomfortable, resistance is uncomfortable. Now, sometimes acceptance is uncomfortable too, but the result will be that you have loved yourself through the thing, and the thing will resolve. Whenever it can, whenever it's appropriate to do so, right? Because I'm not saying that some people's souls didn't come in here to experience the death through cancer or another ailment, or to actually, if somebody believes in psychic attacks and devils and evil spirits and ghosts and all that, which I'm not saying that they would be wrong to believe in them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, those things given power can affect you, but you would be the one giving them power. You see? Did you ever notice, like, people who don't believe in ghosts don't get bothered by ghosts? It's because they have not given power to any ghosts. Is there like a spirit like that exists that could prey on somebody who doesn't believe and make them believe? Sure. But that was a weakness within them, that they were able or willing to give their power away to something paranormal. So, I don't know, does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying? You know, like I said, what prompted this was this vlogger's title about how they've gone to war, you know, fighting for their mother's life. And I know it's a sensitive topic and it's really upsetting and it's very challenging to surrender and to accept that mother has the illness. Now, like I said, you don't own the illness, but you can accept that mother is experiencing something here that needs to pass through, that she needs to be stronger than. But being stronger than doesn't mean you're at war with it, right? For you to be strong, it doesn't mean somebody else has to lose. It just means you have to be strong enough to handle what your body needs to handle, to stay healthy, to get healthy, to overcome the challenges that it's facing. Faith, surrender, acceptance, and loving the self through it. I mean, these things are so powerful. I think it would be hard to convince somebody who's skeptical or has never had the experience of a miracle, you know? But I have time and time again known that I have shifted my reality by using these laws of the universe, and they are laws of the universe, This is how energy works. And you can look at the 7 Hermetic principles to understand better how energy works and utilize those principles of energy in very practical ways, like I've mentioned here. So if you are going to die of cancer and you do all the things that I said and it doesn't work, right? But if your soul's plan was to pass on of that illness, it's unlikely that you would override it with the rest of everything, right? But in the cases where you can save yourself, where you given the possibility of using your free will to take yourself off of that trajectory and out of that timeline, what would it hurt by doing it if that's a possibility, right? I don't think it's common for souls to plan to check out by cancer, right? I think that some may have. Sometimes the death of somebody can hit so many hearts that it breaks them open. And so sometimes it's like a sacrifice that people have signed up for, So I don't want to say that, no matter what I'm saying, if you do it, it will work, because there are those exceptions, right? Like, I'm not reading somebody's specific chart when I'm giving this advice and things like that. And I'm not actually giving advice. I'm just telling you what I know about how energy works and why certain things that are very common in our society, and what may have been even taught to us in some religious environments about defending the self or about fighting for, I don't know if those things are in the Bible or not, but I know that these 2 people in particular that I'm talking about, one defending themselves against psychic attacks and the other fighting for their life, they're both very religious. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. Whereas I'm looking at energy through energy, not religion, Like, yeah, a lot of religious concepts fit because they're based on laws of the universe. But sometimes, there's other stuff in there. Sometimes it's been edited or, it's being translated in a way that's, inaccurate or limiting. So yeah, I don't know. I just felt like sharing that. I felt strongly like sharing that, because it's just something I've been seeing a bit of, and I thought maybe if I talk about it a bit, I can either like get that off my chest, share this perspective, and if there is something in it for me to see further about how it's affecting me or why I'm manifesting that into my reality of seeing a lot of that. It could just be for the purpose of sharing my view on those things, but sometimes it would mean that I have something to look at within myself, right? And so I'm always open to that as well. But for now, what I can see is that it's just for the purpose of me sharing that in these practical ways, even then, we're looking to neutralize the field. And neutralizing the field means acceptance. It means don't resist. It means not starting a war. It means loving self through whatever the difficulty is. All right, any questions? What do you think? Do you have any examples of times that you've used these laws of the universe to affect your own reality? Let me know.